Side of Washington. Oh, that's fun since I'm on the east side of Washington.
Betsy, you're going to see two Teresas because I'm using my computer and my son's using my iPad. And he signed up, but we've had a crazy afternoon and evening, and we're lucky to be in a place where we can sit here and do this.
Well, good. If you're in, you're fine.
Okay. Well, and I think he's in also, but you're going to see two Teresas. But
okay.
One doesn't look like me. One has a beard.
Hola, beloved Kudith.
We just lost sound, Eric.
El Dios de los pobres, el Dios humano y sencillo, el Dios que suda en la calle, el Dios de rostro curtido. Por eso es que te hablo yo, así como habla mi pueblo, porque eres el Dios obrero, el Cristo trabajador. Tú vas de la mano con mi gente, luchas en el campo, en la ciudad, haces fila ya en el campamento para que te paguen tu jornal. Tú comes sentado allá en el parque con Eusebio, Pancho y Juan José, y hasta protestas por el sirope cuando no le ponen mucha miel. Tú eres el Dios de los pobres, el Dios humano y sencillo, el Dios que suda en la calle, el Dios de rostro curtido. Por eso es que te hablo yo, así como habla mi pueblo, porque eres el Dios obrero, el Cristo trabajador. Que suda en la calle, el Dios de rostro curtido. Por eso es que te hablo yo, así como habla mi pueblo, porque eres el Dios obrero, el Cristo trabajador. Yo te he visto en una pulpería, instalado en un caramanchel, te he visto vendiendo lotería, sin que te avergüence ese papel. Yo te he visto en las gasolineras, revisando llantas a un camión, y hasta trabajando en carreteras, con guantes de cuero a pleno sol. Tú eres el Dios de los pobres, el Dios humano y sencillo, el Dios que suda en la calle, el Dios de rostro curtido.
Bienvenidas, bienvenidos I am Betsy Moe, a pastor and mission co-worker in the PCUSA and facilitator for the Intercultural Encounters program at SEDEPCA. On behalf of the entire staff at SEDEPCA, welcome to today's virtual journey. I am pleased to be your travel guide today. The country of Guatemala, because of its geographic location, is extremely vulnerable to natural disasters. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions going on even now, drought, hurricanes, floods, and landslides. Last year, while the people of Guatemala were dealing with the threat of COVID-19, trying to manage the spread through closing businesses and schools and living under strict regulations and curfews, tropical storms Eta and Iota hit the Alta and Baja Verapaz departments, taking lives, destroying roads, homes, businesses, and cropland, displacing entire communities. Now imagine working through the aftermath of storms like this, where the ongoing storm of corruption is present at all levels of government, and where systems of aid are broken or do not even exist. Today's virtual journey is titled After the Storms, Humanitarian Aid in Times of Disaster. And we do plan to share with you how help has been offered after these most recent storms. But as you know, addressing need always involves more than giving first aid or handouts right after a disaster strikes. Since 2007, SEDEPCA has been accompanying vulnerable people in Guatemala through their comprehensive disaster ministry program. Currently, there are 4 staff people working in the disaster ministry. Francisco Reina, the coordinator for projects, Anna Paxtor, facilitator of psychosocial care, Luis Sarpek, facilitator of risk management, and Esvin Serene, facilitator for logistics and pastoral care. Today, this gifted, passionate, and compassionate team is going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the accompaniment that they provide before, during, and after a storm or disaster. You will also hear from the Reverend Edwin Gonzalez Castillo, a representative from the Presbyterian Disaster Assistance Program. We hope that in 90 minutes, when you are packing up your bags to head back north, you will have a better understanding of the crucial role SEDEPCA's disaster ministry plays, not only in bringing healing and hope, but also in creating a more just and equitable world. To start, we want to give you the opportunity to meet some of your fellow travelers. One of my favorite parts of every journey is getting to know the people that I'm with. So in a moment, you will automatically be put into a breakout room with 3 or 4 other people. We're going to try managing our breakout rooms a little bit differently today because our virtual journeys have grown. There will not be a pre-assigned leader in your breakout room. What we want you to do is speak in alphabetical order using your first name. So once you're in the room, you just take charge if your name is closest to the letter A and you share first. So we have a couple of things for you to share in the breakout room. The first is simple. Introduce yourself and say where you are from. Then tell either about a storm that you have lived through, or tell about an aid or recovery effort that you have been a part of. Here's an example. My name is Betsy Moe, and I lived through a major windstorm in Spokane in this last January, just a couple of months ago. So don't worry, these questions will be in the chat box when you go to your breakout room. You're only going to have six minutes in this breakout room. And so I encourage you to keep the conversation moving and your answers brief. Make sure that everyone gets a chance to share. So have fun in your breakout room.
Wasn't we been in some kind of... I can't think of any. Hello. Who's in my room with me? Are you leaving till you go to your room? Hola. Hello, Paula. Are you there? There you are. Hi. So I'm Eric Moe. I'm behind the scenes. I'm the man behind the curtain today, running some of the technology. But right now we're in small groups, and we're just introducing ourselves. And so yeah, unmute yourself and.
Got it.
So where are you from?
Right now I'm in Winchester, Virginia.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I'm out in Spokane, Washington, and the other question we're supposed to answer is name a storm you've lived through.
Oh, a storm I've lived through.
Yeah.
You might consider the last 4 years under President Trump a storm.
We're still alive. Made it through that one.
I was in Tallahassee, Florida when a storm went through. I don't remember the name,
Oh yeah.
but we didn't have, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't have any, a lot of trees down, but there was no significant damage to where I was or my life at that time. So
boy, we get firestorms here in Spokane a lot in the summers. There's just fires all over the area, and even just the Pacific Northwest. We can get smoke from Montana or Oregon, and there was a couple summers ago where it just got really, really bad, and we're not supposed to go outside, not supposed to breathe, and
I have a friend in Salt Lake City that they are in kind of a bowl situation where the fog from the California fires comes into Utah, and it's really a big problem. So I can't imagine. I have lived in Illinois and Tennessee and Florida, and now here in Virginia.
Yeah.
And the climate change is real, and we are seeing more and more and more disasters.
Yeah. Well, I'm a trumpet player actually, and I remember auditioning for a couple symphonies. I did the Richmond Symphony and the Virginia Symphony, and I didn't get neither one. But I remember thinking that Virginia would have been a pretty nice place to live. So.
Yes, we moved here from Atlanta. I retired. And my husband, he is a medical technologist. I am a retired nurse practitioner. We have 2 grandchildren that have a mother and father also. Yeah. But the grandchildren are more important. So they are, it's a beautiful state. and it
Yes,
is
it
now
is.
blue, which is good.
Well, I need to close these rooms and get things rolling again, but it was nice to meet you, Paula.
Thank you, and
Take
I
care.
apologize. I'm glad I got on board.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Enjoy the rest of the trip
Sedefka is a
here.
favorite.
Oh, good.
I love your background. We've been watching jazz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you later.
Hey, Eric? Well,
Yes.
well, I don't know if people is coming back right now. I think so, right?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Welcome back. Hopefully everybody's back and nobody got lost in a breakout room. But now that you've met some of your fellow travelers, let's get started with our journey at the Sedefka Center, where I want to introduce you to Francisca Reina, coordinator of projects in the disaster ministry. Now, if you think of questions for Francisco while he is talking, you are free to type them in the chat, and hopefully we would get to them at the end of his time with us. So Francisco.
Thank you very much, Betsy. I will need to share a screen. But I don't.
Yeah, Eric, can you give him permission to do that?
I can see Francisco.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now he wants to share a PowerPoint while he talks. So.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I will share a PowerPoint with you, but I don't have permission to share it. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to share this virtual journey with you. My name is Francisco Reina. I have been working at Sedefka since 2018, when the emergency caused by fire volcano was attended to. I have had the opportunity to collaborate with the institution during these years, and I greatly appreciate the principles and values that are practiced in Sedefka. It's a great team committed with author and with a great willingness to service. I work with disaster prevention and attention team, and I will briefly tell you what we do in this area of prevention. I don't know if I can now share screen, let's see. Yes, I can. Okay.
Yep, we see it.
Oh.
That's great.
First, I want to say something. I would like to say that during disaster, the threats to the life, properties, and opportunities of members of the affected communities are exacerbated. But in reality, these threats are always present in our countries. You know what is our situation? As Betsy said, corruption is a big problem and other things also. But why do I believe that prevention is important? Because it reduces risk factors. It aims at addressing conditions of vulnerability of human groups and communities. I will touch on this matter later, but let's see the next diapositive. What are we doing at Sedefka to teach about prevention and preparation? We do a lot of things. Prevention means knowing in deep the context, building relationships with communities. We follow up and monitor the threats present in the context. We know the organization and material resources available to the communities. We encourage the preparation of all the actors present in the communities and the participation of all of them. And we design response plans and train and educate in different topics of interest at the community level. All that you can see on the screen are part of our work in prevention. But I will show you, probably for you, a complex equation, but it's necessary to explain to you what we do and what we do some of these things in some areas. In summary, from SEDEPCA's disaster ministry, we act according to the following. A disaster occurs when a threat hits a vulnerable context. What it means, if we have a threat and we have a vulnerable area, sure, we will have a disaster. Because if we don't have a vulnerable area, if a threat hit a population, we don't have a disaster. We can see, for example, in a desert, in Sahara, for example, desertic area, in the middle of the area, if an earthquake occurs, we don't have a disaster. But prevention is saying no to the occurrence of a disaster. It is to concrete certain conditions of resilience. We create resilience with prevention. What that means? Looking at the equation, at this equation, we have two important variables: threats and vulnerability. We can not act and prevent a disaster from happening, an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, a hurricane, a tropical storm, because the possibility of controlling nature are remote. Then we can act only on vulnerabilities. In what way? Identifying vulnerabilities and implement action to address them, and according to preparedness and response plans. Therefore, the only way to reduce the possibility of disaster occurrence is to act on vulnerabilities. The concept of vulnerability, by definition, is eminently social. So we can act in social way, cooperating with communities, building relationships, advising, training, accompanying, providing services, giving humanitarian assistance in order to reduce vulnerabilities and minimize the impact of disasters. To this end, preparation is extremely important for us. Through training, we offer practical knowledge. For example, mental health training, environment, and setting up early warning systems. And through these interactions, we strengthen relationships. This is the preparation. The prevention and preparation is all about establishing networks and support. All these, do all these things, we have also a big support from you mainly. Thank you for that. And also for ACT Alliance and diverse humanitarian principles and policies, sphere manual, humanitarian letter, core humanitarian standard, YASC is the interagency standing committee, etc. And finally, for us, the main commitment assumed in humanitarian duty, which seeks primarily the prevention of lives with dignity, with inclusion, with respect for culture, local practices, and beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. That is really helpful, actually, to see, disasters will come. They will happen. But what can we act on? It's those, the places of vulnerability. And that was clear. I got it. Any questions for Francisco? Describe the role. Okay, I see one. Describe the role that CONRED, the Coordination Agency for Disaster Reduction. It seems like local municipalities play a large role, at least up in the Altiplano. Is that true? That
Let me see.
What role does CONRED play and local municipalities?
Okay. The CONRED is the big institution responsible for emergency response. They have not a lot of resources because, as you know, the priorities in this country are not this kind of issues. And it's sad, this situation, because as we know, we are a country really, really vulnerable to climate change, to natural phenomena, and other things. Also, we are vulnerable in relation with human threats, narco traffic, for example, and some social conflicts. And in this question is very interesting, this issue of municipalities, because municipalities are part of the CONRED system, and municipalities have a very limited field of actions in this way. I say it's so sad, the situation. The other question, how much the government agencies, how well do they collaborate with others? We are part of humanitarian team in this country, and we try to cooperate between us, sharing information, sharing some resources. And I think there is a very, very good cooperation for the international community. But at local level, we have some limitation with resources, and share resources is for us very difficult, really.
Okay, thanks, Francisco.
And yes, CONRED is like FEMA.
Like FEMA, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so thank you, Francisco. We've now seen that SEDEPCA has this important role to play in prevention and preparation, really, for a disaster, the relational and this educational groundwork that is laid. This is really more the daily work of SEDEPCA's disaster ministry. But now we are going to move into a more uncomfortable space as our journey takes a turn into the immediate aftermath of a storm. Some of you may not love traveling in small airplanes, but I'm going to ask you to climb aboard a virtual one today because it will give us the best overall view of the landscape. Imagine with me that it is November of 2020 and the storms have just hit. We are going to travel north together to the Department of Alta Verapaz, where the damage was the worst. What you're about to see is actual footage of the area. After we land, you'll be hearing from SEDEPCA's risk management facilitator, Luis Sarpec. I'll ask you to please mute your microphones and turn off your camera to optimize your experience of this video. Luis.
My name is Luis Arpec, and I am the part of the risk management team in disaster ministry at CEDEPCA. Thank you for sharing with us this afternoon. The images in this video are almost unbelievable. There was so much water, but it was the reality for tens of thousands of people in Guatemala late last year. My team and I had the opportunity this last December to travel to these communities in the north to deliver aid. When a disaster strikes, team contacts the leadership in our partners' communities and churches to ask about the damage and find out what their immediately needs are. We verify if this has access to the community, and we start working on a proposal for a humanitarian aid response. Then we order two supplies and prepare the items for delivery. When we arrive in Alta Verapaz, of course, we encounter many people in need and hear their stories. Now, we would like to show you a video of three testimonies. The first person is named Alicia Maribel. The second is Cesar Augusto. And the third is Jorge Eduardo.
Estamos con nuestra hermana Alicia Maribel, la cual ha sido una de las personas que ha sido bastante afectadas en esta tormenta tropical ETA.
Perdimos todo porque solo logramos salir sobre el techo de la casa, porque la casa como está enfrente de la laguna y aquí es una gran laguna, entonces se nos entró el agua y todo pasó en una sola noche, porque cuando nos dormimos no estaba muy hasta dentro de la casa, solo estaba en la sala, entonces ya cuando amanecimos nosotros ya estábamos sobre el agua, entonces tratamos la manera de sacar a los niños, más que todo pues mis hijos, salir y buscar la manera de cómo poder apoyarnos, a avisarle a nuestros familiares que llegaran a auxiliarnos, ¿verdad? Porque la mera verdad cada quien tenía que salir a como pudiera.
Muy buenos días. Mi nombre es César Augusto Yathul. Aquí estamos tomando este video. Aquí está mi casa en el agua. Se quedó en el agua. Se hundió. y el agua se hundió a las 2 de la mañana. Ya no pudimos sacar las cosas, se quedaron ahí adentro. Ya solo mi ropa que tengo puesto. Y ya no tenemos nada, nosotros somos agricultores y toda la siembra perdimos. Ya no estamos trabajando, nos quedamos encerrados porque ya no hay salida, ya no hay entrada, ya no hay paso para salir ni para trabajar, ya no tenemos nada, pues como estudiante de SEDEPCA, pues pido el apoyo, va, porque la mera verdad estamos necesitados, mi familia, pues me reporto desde aquí de Santa Cruz, Alta Verapaz, casi llegando a Cobán, de una aldea Chitul. Y hoy es día miércoles 25 de noviembre.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Jorge Eduardo Yathul. Yo soy un estudiante de SEDEPCAM. Como pueden ver aquí en este video, este es mi hogar, esta es mi casa. Aquí yo vivía, pero lamentablemente se inundó todo. La mayoría de nuestras cosas se quedaron ahí adentro. Yo soy carpintero y ahora me quedé sin trabajo porque lamentablemente el taller donde yo trabajo se llenó todo de agua. Entonces ahora nos está costando un poco porque ya no tenemos nada. Ahora necesitamos más apoyo porque lamentablemente yo solo me quedé con un poco de ropa, ya no tengo ropa. A medianoche salimos porque ya se estaba llenando y había mucha agua, entonces nos costó sacar nuestras cosas porque ya era más peligroso. Entonces yo aquí me reporto desde Santa Cruz, Alta Verapaz, en una aldea Chitul, es aquí donde yo vivo. Hoy es 25 de noviembre, el día miércoles del año 2020.
As you can see in the video, the damage was extensive and many families needed help. On SEDEPCA's trip to Alta Verapaz, we delivered different things like food bags, hygiene kits, and blankets and towel kits. A local church was our distribution center. The most important thing we can offer in the middle of the acute crisis is letting people know that they are not alone. On this visit, SEDEPCA provides first psychological help, spiritual support, and psychological care. This was done in person and through telephone calls. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luis. We're going to hear a little more from Luis later. We're having a little bit of a problem. We would love to see Luis's face, and hopefully Luis will see your face a little later. But Eric, it seems that our video is, we need the host to enable video in addition to unmuting the microphones.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Okay, thanks. So you've seen my face, so I'll just keep talking. The immediate hands-on aid that SEDEPCA provides is part of a larger network of support that SEDEPCA's disaster ministry is funded by these other partners. Partly they receive funds by direct donation, but their larger partnerships make possible the kind of aid that you're seeing in the pictures. One of their key partners is ECO, an interchurch NGO in the Netherlands. Another is the Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, or PDA, in the United States. If you're Presbyterian and you give to the One Great Hour of Sharing offering that's collected around this time of year, part of that offering goes to PDA, which sends funds to organizations like SEDEPCA's disaster ministry. We are thrilled to have as one of our travelers today, the Reverend Edwin Gonzalez Castillo, who works for the Presbyterian Disaster Assistance Program in Louisville, Kentucky. Edwin is the Associate for Disaster Response for Latin America and the Caribbean. Edwin, will you please share with us how partnering works from your end of things? Oh, there we go. We at least see Edwin's picture if we won't have his video.
Thank you. I have the same smile. So yeah. Thank you, Betsy. We give thanks for the opportunity to participate in this virtual journey and to be able to accompany our friends from SEDEPCA. SEDEPCA is an important partner in Guatemala who has been working together with PDA for many, many years now. Just so you know, Presbyterian Disaster Assistance is the emergency and refugee program of the Presbyterian Church USA, enabling congregations and mission partners of the Presbyterian Church to witness to the healing love of Christ through caring for communities adversely affected by crisis and catastrophic events. As best.
Hey, Edwin, I'm going to interrupt for a second. Can you try starting your video one more time? I think Eric's made you a co-host.
Okay, let me see. Yes, it works now. Perfect. And as Betsy was mentioning, the core budget, including staff and administrative costs, is funded through the One Great Hour of Sharing, and its programs work is additionally funded through other designated gifts. Thanks to these gifts, PDA focuses on the long-term recovery of disaster impacted communities. And this is done internationally by working collaboratively with church partners and members of ACT Alliance, as was previously mentioned, is Action by Churches Together, and nationally with other faith-based responders. We do this understanding that throughout the world, believers experience the call of God to respond together in times of local, regional, and national crisis. Indigenous churches and believing communities best understand the needs of the cultural context of their own people. And it is often the churches and NGOs like SEDEPCA that offer the most effective and sustained effort in response to human suffering. We are called to stand with all our overseas partners and to respond to their requests for assistance as they reach out to serve their neighbors. And this is part of our enduring witness to Christ's love worldwide. Regarding Hurricane Eta and Iota, PDA was in constant communication with SEDEPCA and other organizations in Central America. We have partners in all over Latin America and in Central America. And we were in contact with them before, during, and after these storms. PDA was able to provide a solidarity grant to provide assistance to vulnerable communities. And we have initiated conversations regarding long-term recovery projects to respond to the ongoing effects of these hurricanes. Here in PDA, we really value the relationship we have developed with SEDEPCA and the ways we have partnered to provide the best assistance to the communities. It has been a great pleasure to work with the whole team in SEDEPCA. We were able to meet them before the pandemic on 2019. And it was an important meeting where we got to see the work that they were doing and hear more about their work. And we were really impressed about the wonderful things that they do and with so little. And they do, they are really good stewards of what God has given them to help the communities. They have it in the hands and feet of God with our siblings in Guatemala. And we pray that God may continue to use SEDEPCA as an instrument of God's grace and wherever they work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Esvin Sideng. I work in logistics and pastoral accompaniment for the disaster ministry and the intercultural encounters. I want to say thank you, Edwin, for PDA's partnership with us. Partnerships such as PDA and ECO are signs of hope for communities in need. I hear from many people how they have felt accompanied, supported, and dignified by SEDEPCA. But That thanks should be directed to PDA and ECO and to individual donors and local churches that made this possible. By now, you have heard from Francisco, Luis, Edwin about how help is mobilized before a disaster and in the midst of a disaster. But we at SEDEPCA realize that the long-term recovery of communities is just as important. How can we as the body of Christ accompany people who are suffering many months or even years after a crisis event? Recently, our disaster ministry team made a second visit to Alta Verapaz region to deliver water filters and follow up with communities. Most of the people had gone back to what was left of their houses, animals, and crops. Some others just went back to the dirt where their house used to be. Of course, they have a long way to recover, but they are working as families and as a community to move on. We were able to have second interviews with Alicia, Cesar Augusto, and Jorge Eduardo, and we want you to hear how they are doing now. Come with me on a short trip to meet them. We're going to encounter some road constructions, so hang on to the bus seat as we hit the bumps.
Mi nombre es Alicia María del Sopo, de San Cristóbal Alta Verapaz, barrio San Felipe. A pesar de todo, aquí estamos luchando, saliendo poco a poco, reconstruyendo todo lo que se nos arruinó, todo lo que perdimos. Pero bendito Dios, contamos con vida para poder seguir luchando en todo, ¿verdad? Y agradecemos en parte a los de SEDECA que aparecieron en el momento justo que los necesitábamos y ha sido de una gran bendición para nosotros, para nuestras familias, la ayuda que nos han brindado y nos siguen brindando. Les agradecemos bastante y esperemos que nos sigan apoyando, ¿verdad? Porque realmente lo necesitamos. Pues nosotros realmente perdimos camas, roperos, estufas, muebles, ¿verdad? Entonces estamos poco a poco levantando, reconstruyendo. Muchas gracias.
Hoy es 23 de febrero del 2021. Aquí estamos viendo todo mi siembra que de una vez lo perdimos, ya no logramos nada. Invertimos aquí 25,000 quetzales y no ganamos nada, perdimos todo. Y todo esto fue afectado a todas las personas, mis vecinos tuvieron que evacuar ese día, pero gracias a Dios ahora estamos comenzando otra nueva vida. Que le damos gracias a Dios que nos ayude en nuestras vidas y gracias a ustedes también que nos entrevistan qué es lo que ha pasado con nosotros como aldeanos.
Bueno, mi nombre es Jorge Eduardo Yatul, de Santa Cruz, Santa Verapaz, en una aldea Chitul. Esta es mi casa, aquí es donde vivimos yo y mis familias, mis padres. Hoy pues estamos viviendo acá, nos está costando un poco, casi perdimos todo lo material que teníamos, pero gracias a Dios ahora pues, como ven ahora pues hay un cambio que estamos comenzando una nueva vida, ya el agua pues gracias a Dios que hace un mes que se secó y ya solo se ve el lugar del agua donde pasó y le doy gracias a Dios que nos encontramos bien de salud y muchas gracias hermano por esta entrevista.
So as you can see, the follow-up options that SEDEPCA provides mean a lot to communities and individuals. Many people, despite losing everything, have felt encouraged and hopeful when we visit and let them know that they're not forgotten. It became clear to us that the greatest material need at this point in recovery was clean water. So on this second trip to Alta Verapaz, we delivered water filters as a sign of accompaniment. I'll hand it over to Luis to tell you more about the water filters delivery.
Thank you, Esbin. The water filter are a huge benefit for the communities because after a disaster, water resources are contaminated and buying water for human consumption is really, really expensive. The water filter we deliver have the capacity to filter 20 liters of water garden from a river or a tap or from the rain. Water filters save the family money because they don't have to use firewood or gas to boil the water. The filter are good for 2 years and then the family has to replace the filtering unit. We walk them through this process so they can benefit from having a filter for years to come.
Another important part of the follow-up in communities is continued psychological support because many internal crises arise out of disasters and insecurity. I would like to introduce our colleague psychologist, Ana Pastor, who's in charge of the psychosocial support in our disaster ministry.
Hello, everyone. It is so good to be with you today. After a disaster, people experience loss and sadness. It is stressful to search for options to cover basic needs. People may feel hopeless about their family usuals. They may fear that they will face a similar event in the future. To attend to these needs, we at SEDEPCA have started leading in-person workshops with community leaders and the general population. We are partnering with an organization in Baja Verapaz and 2 churches in Alta Verapaz. We talk about crisis, stress, techniques to manage crisis, suicide, and self-esteem. The topic is chosen to fit the group's needs. Our main goal is to strengthen emotional resilience. This is our way of working alongside people in these communities. I want to say thank you for coming alongside of us as we provide hope and care to others. And I invite you to pay attention to the needs of people near or far who may be suffering fatigue, stress, thoughts of suicide, depression, and other emotional effects provoked by the pandemic or other emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and to all of SEDEPCA's disaster ministry staff who shared with us today. Now they would like to hear from you, our travelers. If you have questions or a comment for them, I would ask that you post that now in the chat. And while you are thinking of them, while you write something in the chat, I'll ask the first question. I have found that the most often, and we were actually talking about this in our breakout room, how striking it is to see neighbors helping neighbors. And so I'm wondering, when you went up to Baja and Alta Verapaz, how you saw local churches at work or neighbors helping neighbors there. Do you have any stories or memories from that kind of observation?
Yes, and I'd like to share what we have not only here, but we have also seen from the testimonies from the people that was affected. In fact, many have shared that they were rescued by their neighbors. Their house was flooding, and many of them did not know about the tropical storm. Their house was flooding. This was at midnight, and their neighbors, together were able to rescue them from the rooftop. Um, and they continue helping each other. Some others provided that were not as affected. They pretty much provided the neighbors a place to stay. Some others provided them a house to live in for months, while they would return to their houses. So it's really a community helping each other. So uh, it is that's how they have been able to move on from this disaster.
There was a question in the chat about previous relationships with these communities and kind of how do you determine who receives the aid, the support, and what relationships did you have with these communities before the disaster struck?
SEDEPCA has always contacts in the communities, especially with leadership, leaders, women and men, that they know their community, they know their needs, they know who to contact. They pretty much select the people that need the food or water filters the most. So we always work with the community leaders, and they are the ones. Also, in this case, there's two churches, one in Coban and the other one in San Cristobal, and those churches are our base where we distribute all the support that we take to Alta Verapaz.
I want to say something about this. To decide how to support people, first we consult with local leaders about needs, because they have all the information of the context. And we need to know what are the main needs in the context. And for experience, local leaders know what they need. And if it is possible, know in this context of pandemia, we go to the communities and we ask people about needs. We speak with people and we determine with people what are the groups more vulnerable in communities. And we work with these groups.
Thank you. This is, it's interesting. It's in the chat also. People are commenting how it's great to see how these relationships that maybe are formed through the women's ministry or the biblical and theological program of SEDEPCA. It's all kind of a part of the same relationship building. It's disaster preparedness, really, having relationships with people in the communities through these other SEDEPCA programs.
Betsy, really is a kind of network.
Mm-hmm.
We work in a kind of network, knowing us, between us, speaking between us, establishing needs and the priority of needs between us. And when I say between us, is with communities, with leaders in communities, with women's, young people, etc.
I see a question about water supply. As I recall, San Cristobal doesn't have a central water treatment system. Often waste went into the water supply. So is anyone helping improve the sanitary sewer system, or is that just not possible or feasible? Anyone want to try to answer that question about water supply, infrastructure? What is the government doing?
I don't think so. That has to improve. In fact, hydroelectrics are just deterring some water resources for their own benefits. So I really don't think it has been any improved whatsoever.
And in these communities, the access to safe water is really difficult because one of the most important issue here is the impact of climate change and the pollution of the water, the contamination of the water is another big issue. And communities don't have enough resources to work on this. And really, as I say before, is not a priority of this government.
Another question about housing and temporary housing. Where were people housed temporarily? What did people do when they evacuated from their homes?
It's a very interesting question. There is a lot of challenge dealing with refugees or with shelters in this country. For us, Conred, what is the institution in charge of this kind of structures, don't have enough capacity also. They use in some areas schools or churches to as shelter for people, but in some cases there are no conditions for people in these areas, and there is also some risk for women and for girls, some risk in these shelters.
Yes, I would say also some local churches open up, the doors for people to stay in. Some the government open up some other shelters like schools, but they receive some donations, or they receive food, but it was mainly from the community. It was just from the church members. But of course, if there were 100 people crowded, and they couldn't stay there for months. So many of them have decided to go back to what was left of their houses. Even though there's still the risk of landslides, uh, they have no place to go. So many of them, decided to go back to what was left, or they just went they also moved to other places with other family members.
There's a little bit of chat going on about migration and these issues that face the United States. And we're seeing how natural disasters in Guatemala aren't just Guatemala's problem. This is something we face together. And so people in crisis may be fleeing north for many reasons, natural disasters being one. If they had to flee from their homes and there is no work, there's no way to provide for their families. And I just want to say that we will be doing another virtual journey on migration later this year, where we'll talk about some of the dynamics, especially this year in a very especially economically trying time for people, and kind of how the new administration is dealing with migration. And as things unfold, I think that virtual journey is going to be a very interesting one, a very important one for us all to be a part of. We need to move on. We've got a biblical reflection that we want to close with. And we're also going to go into breakout rooms again. But I want to say thank you once again to the disaster ministry staff at SEDEPCA And we'll have a little bit of time in the fellowship time at the end of our Zoom if you have more comments or questions for them. But right now, I'd like to call back the Reverend Edwin Gonzalez Castillo from Presbyterian Disaster Assistance to help us all think theologically about responding to crises and needs that in reality will always be with us. Edwin?
Thank you. Gracias. Let's see. The Bible has a wide amount of stories related to disasters and the struggles that we face or they faced aftermath of many situations. Likewise, we can find multiple occasions in which Jesus responded to moments of crisis around him, from contagious diseases, deaths, abuses of government power, storm, and on more than one occasion, situations of hunger. The Gospel of Mark in chapter 6 presents one of these situations in which a great multitude was hungry and Jesus responded to the need. In Jesus' response, we can see a very important humanitarian theology that can, in certain way, guide us in our way of carrying out an effective response. The reading from the New International Bible tells us, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time, it was late in the night, in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already late, very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. They said to him, that will take more than half a year's wage. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. The first thing that stands out in the text is the emotions that Jesus had towards the people, even before the present situation occurred. The word compassion that we see in the beginning of the story and that describes these feelings, the feeling that the community evokes in Jesus, has a beautiful meaning in its original language in Greek. The word in Greek is much more profound. The word is esplagnistes, which in its most simple definition is compassion or mercy. That word is used several times in the gospel, especially in reference to Jesus' response to the suffering of the people. One of those instances is when Jesus saw the people were hungry, like in this case, and had compassion for them. Now, the other amazing thing is that the word Greek esplagnistes can also be associated with pain in the intestines or in the heart, and actually the pain of a woman when it's giving birth. In Spanish is misericordia. That's the word in Spanish, which comes from the Latin and is similar to the word in Greek. It has to do with feeling misery in the heart. Miseria, cordia, cardiology. Jesus felt misery in the heart, pain, similar to a mother giving birth, passion that needed action, compassion. What moved Jesus to helping the people was not that he felt sorry for them or for the people in need, but that he made their pain his pain. He felt empathy for the people. felt that they were in some sense part of him. In our work, when we look at people in need, survivors, those seeking assistance, we are called to make their pain and suffering our pain and suffering. We need to empathize with their situation and find that bond as members of the same body that reminds us that when one part of the body so hurts, the whole body hurts. Now, to the crisis itself. This is not a disaster that occurs in that community, but this does not mean it ceases to be a crisis. Faced with the problem of hunger that is coming, the proposal provided by the disciple is to dispatch the people. If there are no people, there is no problem. Like when the car makes a noise and you turn off the volume of the radio to solve the problem, the solution of the disciples is to the same people, to send the people. If they are not here, if there's no people, there's no problem. So the idea was for them to attend themselves, basically ignore the problem, ignore the people. On the other hand, we see Jesus. And Jesus' proposal is give them food. You give them food. You provide to them. Jesus puts the needs to respond in the hands of his disciples. They do the calculation and come up with how much it will cost to feed them. And it's too much. Instead, Jesus seeks to recognize the resources that are available. He asks, what is there? What do we have here? 5 loaves and 2 fish. So let's look at Jesus' strategy. After giving thanks for the resources available, Jesus engages the disciples in the process of providing food to the people. It is significant to see Jesus' action to provide the answer as a team. He did not do it alone. Jesus worked in partnership with the disciples. They helped identify available resources, establish a concrete plan on how to divide people, and join forces in the response. Jesus could very well have simply made the loaves appear in people's hands, but no, there is a teaching of the importance of working with those who know not only what the need is, but also the resources that are available. The test provides us with a very real example of how well a humanitarian response can be provided. It is very easy to go to a place of need and act with this colonialistic mentality. And I'm from Puerto Rico, so I know a little bit about colony. And to believe that we know what people need and that only we can solve the situation. This test highlights the importance of recognizing resources, not only materials, but people who can join in helping, even though they may not even know how useful they are. But let us also know that Jesus has created a relationship with people and with the response team, disciples. This allows not only a better understanding of what the crisis is, but also what the team's responsiveness is and how best to carry out the plan. Now, there is some people who study this test who understand that the miracle is not that Jesus made food appear out of nowhere, but rather that the miracle is in getting people to share what they had with each other. Without going into the details of that analysis, we must take into account that the humanitarian response involves a process where we all contribute, but also where we all receive. We all have a participation in the response process, and in turn, we all get something in the process. Mutual help and recognizing the other person's contribution to their own care process is significant in our humanitarian response in disaster situations. I believe SEDEPCA's disaster ministry operates with principles in mind. I want to challenge all of us, all of you today to think critically about your own response in crisis situations, where you are. How might God be calling you to engage in offering aid in a way that strengthens the whole community, that signals that God is near. And to help you think about that, I'm going to leave you with 2 questions to discuss in the breakout rooms. Really simple questions. Of the several miracles and transformations in this story, which one stands out to you today? And the second question, and maybe even more important, where are you in this story?
Thank you, Edwin. That was wonderful. So now we get to take the story into our hands with these 2 questions. We're going to go back into those same breakout rooms, and the questions will be in the chat. So if you can't remember them, they'll be there, and we ask you to just answer them in that same alphabetical order in your breakout room. But remember, you're answering of these several miracles, not just this, Jesus making the food multiply. There were several miracles in the story that Edwin just laid out for us. And which one stands out to you today? And secondly, where are you in the story? If you're, are you receiving? Are you the one that's kind of in awe of what God is doing? You locate yourself. So go ahead and enjoy these breakout rooms for about 7 minutes.
Well, are we going to use our time to talk about it?
We can. There's a large group here, so I'm suspecting that some of you did not see the button to click go into a breakout room. So
no.
if you see that button, go ahead and click on it. There should be a
Where
way
where would it be?
Well, I'm not sure, honestly, because I don't get one. I just give everybody else the button.
I hear you.
But if it's not there, then yeah, let's just talk about let's just do it ourselves. Which miracle stands out to you? I am struck by the 2 interpretations of this scripture that, I mean, it's possible that it was a supernatural miracle that Jesus produced more food and distributed it. But it's also possible that maybe the people were just keeping their resources to themselves, and they all realized that if they shared some, that there would be enough to go around. And that might be the bigger miracle.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it reminds me of the story of Stone Soup, where the soldiers came to the village and there was nothing to eat. And the one lady said, well, I have a potato. And someone said, I have a carrot. And by the time they got finished, they had a huge kettle of soup that they could share with everybody. And it was just, I only have one thing and I can't share that. But if you put it all together, it's amazing how much you can make.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a fun story.
I think what's always impressed me in that story is, at least in John's gospel, not Mark's gospel, but John's gospel version, that there's this, there's this boy who's brought forward who has the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Just says, in Mark, it just says they have that, but it doesn't tell where they came from. But
yeah,
I'm thinking for this boy to share, what I guess what impresses me is to give his lunch to Jesus means he's risking not having anything himself. Because with 5,000 people, if he shares his 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, there's no reason to think he'll get any.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time imagining myself doing that because I'm such a cautious guy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's when a kid comes forward. You know, Betsy and I were at a church once, and we were trying to raise money to do a building program. And there was one of the high schoolers who brought forth his baseball card collection and sold it. You know, and when somebody like that comes forward and gives something that's precious to them, it's really inspiring. It's really neat. So, what other thoughts do you have?
I would like to say something, and I think the miracle stands out to me is the miracle of compassion and accompaniment of Jesus with all the people, because he taught not just with words, but also with action and facts. And I think that is really important for the people walk along with them.
Mm-hmm. What other thoughts do you have? Well, I'm going to close the breakout room, so we have 60 seconds, and then everybody will come back to us.
I can see myself in the middle of that crowd and wondering where the food and water, because really water is as important, and clean water. And with that many people, that was probably really something.
Mm-hmm.
It seems enough of a miracle to feed all those people, but then the detail of, and there was food left.
Yeah, yeah.
It was not a zero sum.
Mm-hmm.
And people must have not taken too much.
Yeah.
So that could have, you know, they took what they needed, but not more than that.
Okay, I hope you had a great time in your breakout rooms. I did, and I'm really grateful for meeting fellow travelers today. So we have gotten to see the power of accompaniment tonight. And I want to thank SEDEPCA staff for sharing their perspectives and their stories, and Edwin for sharing his theological insights, so that all of us could catch this vision of what it means to love our neighbors. Most of you who are on this virtual journey are thousands of miles away from what is going on in Guatemala, but by the unifying power of the Spirit, your presence is felt. Learning more about the lives of others is an important form of accompaniment, so thank you. Now I'd like to invite Judith Castañeda to share a few words with us. She is the General Coordinator of SEDEPCA. Judith?
Okay, thank you, Betsy. Well, I just want to say that I'm so happy to see all of these faces, all of these friends. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us in this virtual journey. And thank you for being in partnership with us in this humanitarian response. It's so difficult. I was saying in the breakout rooms that Jesus and disciples, I imagine they were really organized and worked really quickly in partnership, and so they could deliver the food. And this is because of working in partnership, working together. So thanks a lot for, you know, when you come to Guatemala, we hope that soon you will be able to come. Vaccines here was one of the questions. We see that far, but we are happy that you are having your vaccines and that you will probably be able to fly and to come to visit us soon. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for being in partnership. And I invite you to keep doing that.
Thank you, Hudit. It's a good word. I know this past year has been a really difficult one for hands-on service for all of us, as most of us have loved our neighbors by staying at home and keeping our distance. But to the extent that you are able to engage in face-to-face relationships, we pray that you will have the courage to act, to accompany others through hardship wherever you find yourselves. So thank you once again for choosing to spend this part of your day with us. And if you are able to make the suggested $11 donation, thank you for that also. Your participation and your donations make it possible for us to continue offering virtual journeys, which have become a lifeline for maintaining these vital international connections. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, SEDEPCA remains steadfast in its commitment to bringing hope and building a more just world. And I'm so glad you got to see that today. If you haven't donated yet or would like to, or if you wish to make an additional donation, click on the link to our donation site in the chat box or in the follow-up email you'll receive. But again, your accompaniment, your just being here means the world to us. These donations are not expected. As I mentioned before, SEDEPCA is a recipient of funds given through the One Great Hour of Sharing. So I encourage you this year to give generously to that offering. I want to thank all of our presenters today and our behind the scenes Zoom support. Cheryl Esperanza Rowan was running the chat. Nancy Carrera was letting people in. Eric Moe was running all of the video and technological stuff from downstairs from me. And then we had this talented video producer, Rebecca Noriega, who is on the Intercultural Encounters team. Thank you, Rebecca. Those were beautiful videos. Virtual journeys are truly a miracle in how they are designed and managed by a team of people in both the United States and in Guatemala working together. In your follow-up email that you're going to receive, you're going to get a link to a feedback form. We would love to hear your thoughts about the virtual journey today because we intend to keep having them and we want to improve them every time. You'll be also in this follow-up email, you'll be invited to our next virtual journey scheduled for May 19th on the topic of theologies of justice in Central America. We hope that you'll want to join us to learn more about how our understanding of God and God's world and God's relationship with the world has been a powerful, liberating force in the lives of people in Guatemala, how it can be, how it has been through the ministry of SEDEPCA. So finally, we're at the end of our journey, and I invite you to close in prayer with me. Join me in prayer. God, we thank you for your work in this world. You created this world, but you did not leave us alone in it. You continue to journey with us. You see the suffering of your people, and you do not remain far away, but you come close. Thank you for how you have come close through the ministry of SEDEPCA, through local churches and neighbors surrounding people who are in need. And we thank you for your unifying spirit that has allowed all of us to engage in this kind of accompaniment. God, continue to bless the ministry of SEDEPCA, continue to bless each one of us and open our eyes to the way you are working in the world and calling us to partner with you. We close this time giving you thanks in the name of Jesus. Amen. So our Zoom space is going to be open for another 15 minutes. You do not have to stay, but if you would like to stay and greet some of the SEDEPCA staff or one another, you are welcome to stay in the room.
Betsy.
Now, oh yeah.
Yeah,
Judy?
I just want to say, I see that Lily is still here. Lily, are you still here? I saw your question.
Oh, I wasn't even looking at the chat. Okay.
Yeah, there is a question there. Lily is saying that since the American Vice President is working with North American, does SEDEPCA have representation to work with American leaders? There was a delegation that was supposed to be here yesterday, but because of the volcano eruptions, that was delayed. Well, SEDEPCA, right in Guatemala, at least, we have no contacts with any delegations or any government leaders from the U.S., not either from Guatemala exactly, to work on disaster response or to work in the situation that is going on with the vaccines. But through some friends in presbyteries in the US, we may have some contacts. So we will appreciate if there is any contact there with representatives, or like in 2019, Nancy Carrera, Delia Leal, and I visited Newcastle Presbytery, and we had some interviews with a couple of senators, Tom Carter. We met with Lisa Blunt, Rochester, and also with Chris Coons. So yeah, maybe through some friends in the US, we could have some contacts on that. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for answering that. We would be, I and other Presbyterian would love to make sure that we could do something in our side of the country. So